Hey, what's up, Entourage? You are on with Jan.
Dee-doo-doo.
Hey, what's up, Entourage? Welcome back to a brand new episode of On with Jan. And today we have a super special guest with us today, Sensei Ryan Burtney, who is also my husband. So thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Okay, let's jump right into this then.
Okay.
Introduce yourself to everybody. Tell them what you do and who you are. Besides a snack.
I am the husband of the On with Jan.
Ooh.
I don't know if there's anything else that needs to be said.
Tell them about the dojo, how you got started.
Yeah. Besides being your husband,
That is not the most important thing here, although it's very important to me.
I am the owner and head instructor at the College of Martial Arts, which is also your school. We work there together, which has its own bit of tales, I suppose, for another episode.
Why another episode? Tell me right now. Tell me how you feel.
Well, I don't know. Well, hold on. Before I get caught in something. It's nothing to complain about. I'm not sure which direction we wanted to go with this podcast episode. If we want to be more on working with a spouse, if it's more on when you can find legal loopholes to accidentally hit your spouse with kumite.
He did not.
I'm sorry.
Okay, well, tell everybody how you got started, and we'll talk about some of that other good stuff.
All right. Well, I got started in martial arts in 2001, which was the year I graduated. I was 17. In the organization we belonged to, the Zenbei Butokukai International, I kind of have a bit of a unique, I don't want to say start, but my place as an instructor, as a school owner, is a bit different from the others, which has good and bad. But my start was as a youth in sports. I did AYSO soccer, which I enjoyed when I was younger. In middle school, they didn't have soccer, so I moved over to football, which I fell in love with quickly. Then had basketball in the winter season, track and field in the spring, and pretty much did that all through middle school, high school. And in high school, I was fortunate. I had an opportunity to start coaching Parks and Rec in East Point, Parks and Rec basketball, which was a neat experience, as in I had no idea what I was doing and just mimicked what had been done before me. But in 2001, since I was done with sports, and to be honest, I didn't put in the work to make it to college as an athlete. Football is my favorite, but I wasn't really sure what I should be doing. And without digressing too much, just didn't do probably what I should have done. So I wanted something else. And there was a guy who would come into the high school and put on a bit of a demonstration a couple of times a year. And he was teaching out of his home. So I got in contact with him and started with him. And it was only a handful of months. I can't really remember if I started in May or April or whatever, but, right before school ended. And I like a challenge, so I jumped into that with both feet. Wasn't naturally skilled at it. As the class will hear me say, sometimes my instructor would unabashedly say I moved like Bambi on ice or Frankenstein's monster. Which
I don't think you move like that now.
No, not now, but, you say something kind of negative to me, that just it pushes me to not have to hear that again. And I love proving people wrong, right? So then that became, I believe, October of 2001. He opened a brick and mortar school, and I taught there. Being a bit of a naive young man, taught for free, or worked under him for free for a while. But it was still a good experience. being a young person. And then if I skip all the rest of the steps, eventually I became the owner in 2010, officially, when I bought it off him, and worked my tail off to get to the point where the school is now, both in quality of what we teach, quality of students that we teach, and quality of product in the martial artists and their attitude, which I quite enjoy.
So unlike most of your peers, and myself included because I started karate at 6, what do you think that helped you bring to the table, because you didn't start that early? You had the experience of team sports, working with other people in a totally different aspect that martial arts provides. And martial arts does give you the ability to do that, but what do you think, what other perspective do you think you were able to have and are able to have now because of that?
I'm never really sure how to phrase it correctly. You know, it's neat. We have a lot of families at the dojo and over the years that are just sports. And they'll often say that I don't understand sports, or that how much they enjoy the sports. But if I bother to take the time to explain that was my start, and I'll touch back on the other school owners, I suppose, but once I had the opportunity to become a coach, they don't vet you for Parks and Rec or high school athletics coaching. They just ask, and it's a privilege, it's an honor, especially if it's your old head coach. For football, the year after I graduated, the varsity head coach asked me to be an assistant. I think it was on the JV first, and I don't want to say his name, but I was an offensive guard on the line, and he played tackle. So my lineman mate, the other big ugly next to me, as our coaches would call us, for middle school and high school, we were side by side for quite a while. But he was a coach, and so we were starters varsity year. But then when you show up for the next season, I saw people there that never left the bench. And bless their heart for wanting to do it, but I realized that was the first time I realized that I shouldn't say no. Generally, they're not checked. They want someone with a bit of a background, and they're the ones donating their time, by the way.
And bless those people's hearts.
Well, yeah, because time's the most valuable thing we have. But even when I played AYSO soccer, it was always someone's mom. Just at the last minute had the coach, because we had a coach almost every season. That seemed like all of elementary school. Every season was, here's Coach whatever, Bill. And then the day of the first practice, Coach Bill can't make practice, so here's Mrs. One of our dogs. We're doing this at home. So if you're the occasional yep, it's one of our 3 chihuahuas that we're trying to make be quiet. So apologies, but the privilege of getting the coach, I love that. But it switched how I don't know. It switched how I felt about. Let me phrase it this way. So as a sensei, you try to put yourself to a high tier, character-wise, yeah? And, you might as well be a sensei. You're just senpai, because it's tricky if there are 2 sensei. So there's Sensei Ryan Burtney and Senpai Yana Burtney, but we're the head instructors, right? And you want to have a high bar for your students to try to follow. Now, granted, a lot of martial artists I've known in my life are not of the highest caliber character, hands down. But I try to hold myself to that. And when you start to think, or when I start to think back of how coaches were, football and basketball and track, it's a little more broy, I guess. A little bit of vulgarities, swearing, jokes about cheerleaders and jokes about partying and whatever. They try to be cool with the kids. You don't do that in the martial arts. You let people kind of decide on their own, but you want to try to set a standard, give someone something to follow.
So you don't think essentially you don't think coaches fill the role of a mentor the way that they could or should?
Well, I'm going to be careful of saying that before someone throws a football at my head.
Here comes one now.
Yeah. Not to downplay any coaches at all, because I loved playing the athletics.
So what you're getting at is the athletics should be there and they're fun, but they don't come with all the value that maybe martial arts does.
The martial arts can. Not to say I learned plenty from my coaches over the years. I just would pay, you remember certain tiny things that'll stick in your head, which makes me self-conscious all the time when I'm teaching on the floor. If I feel as if I maybe missed a chance to compliment a student, or maybe might have sounded like I was being a little too harsh, that bugs me quite a bit on occasion to think, what stuck in their head. But the opportunity for a mentor, the fact that you are a mentor, or the fact that you're in a position to be a mentor, does not mean you are a mentor, and does not mean that you should be a mentor. If that allows any clarity.
Yeah, I think so. I didn't have the chance of really playing any team sports. I mean, here and there when I was little, but I was never like on a team aside from cheerleading in high school. But I was supplementing while doing karate. It wasn't like I had my first start in that and then transitioned. So for me, it was always like karate comes first, everything else comes second. Like it's fun, it's exciting. I get to hang out with friends. High school sports, at least from my perspective and being a part of cheerleading, were never really taken as seriously as it was when I came to the dojo. Like when I came to the dojo and I have my gi on and I stand in line and I do what sensei says, like that's that. When you go to cheerleading practice, it's kind of like, oh, they talk, you have a good time, finally the coach begins the practice, this and that. And it was a totally different dynamic. So for me, I think it's important that kids and students and teens have the experience of knowing what it's like to come into the dojo, and you have the discipline as soon as you walk through the door. Because you're able to see the lack of discipline and some of the other aspects, because discipline isn't the biggest and most important part in some of those sports. You need it, and people have it when you're at a very high level. But like you said, you can ride the bench the entire season. And you're just part of the team, you're having fun.
And that's the important part, mind you. There's so much socializing you get to do, and I don't want to say character growth, because sometimes you're just belittled on the team. There's always a few students like around the mat, players, classmates that just get picked on, or the ones that have the natural athleticism. Which I guess if that pulls me back to the martial arts. See, the thing with team sports is if you're naturally skilled, you're definitely going to excel. And if you have a great coach, you'll go beyond. If you have an okay coach, you'll do fine. But a great coach could pull up even the mediocre or below players. But it takes, as someone who had to learn how to teach, it takes a lot of practice, patience, and internal reflection to become a good teacher, to become a great teacher. Coming up in martial arts, my teacher wasn't great at all. Our school used to get made fun of, and we'd pretend we're like, oh no, we're great. We were terrible. Our kata was poor. Our kumite was okay. I mean, we liked to scrap a bit, but when it came to the point sparring, we would do okay. I didn't know the rules until I got higher. But once I had purchased the school and then floundered for about 2 years or so, trying to match how the previous owner had done it, before realizing, like a fool, that this is and has not been working.
Two things before you continue that. One, I'd like to put a lot of respect on your name for sticking through all of that, because that's not easy. Having to pick something up out of the mud over a long period of time is not an easy thing to do. And that's admirable because it takes a lot of effort and grit and continued effort over a long period of time. And look, you're still working really hard.
Well, thank you, beautiful wife. Well, that's something it almost makes me sad. That's something I want the students to catch on. But what I'll kind of gripe about in class with the higher ups, maybe the adults, is I'll mention the path of least resistance, although that's not how it's said. I forget the book we read in leadership not long ago, but one of the students, I won't say his name, but he's always sharp every time and corrects me that it's not actually the path of least resistance, but it's people want to do the simplest thing. But for me, there's no reward. You buy a thing of ice cream and eat it, and it tastes good, but you feel terrible after, right? But it was easy, and do easy things on occasion. But the satisfaction of having done something difficult, and I suppose say triumph. For these are things I've had to learn over time, and in truth, a lot of it's out of spite. It's out of spite because if someone tells me you're not good at it or you can't do it, I don't want to say it shouldn't be, because sometimes if someone says it shouldn't be, you should maybe consider that for a second. But if you say, no, that's too tough, I don't think you can do that, and don't tell me that stuff. You're going to make me want to do it, and then I will do it.
And here you are.
Well, yeah, but we still go through that stuff. And the toughest thing we face now in 2023, which, how many years is that training for you now? 2022?
I started in 01.
Yeah, okay, so we each have about 22 years of training. And I started teaching same year I started training, which does not make that doesn't count. That was a smart person influencing and potentially taking advantage of a naive young person until I was like, wait a second, bamboozle. But either way, everything you go through puts you where you are now.
Yeah.
Even the crappy stuff, the things we'd rather not have gone through, but you need that, and that's all part of it. So if I try to sum all that together, is this how I talk normally, where I kind of bounce around? How do you deal with that?
I'm very good at taking mental notes.
Good. So if anyone listening to this might have to go with a notepad.
I think we're doing pretty okay.
Okay.
Yeah, the course is...
Put in 8 parts and segmented. Well, anyway, so having done sports first gave me a different appreciation for the athleticism. And I think also just made me a little more gung-ho and eager to try things. The self-defense, personally, where I'll attempt the technique because I understand the physicality. Even as a wee me, playing outside and wrestling and getting the occasional little fight with your friends, which, as you've heard me mention on the floor, I thought was very common, and it was not common. No one else really found that relatable, except for, a couple of our students. But it teaches you not to fear the physicality because you've done the physicality, which is something else people need to learn. Is your body is very capable. You're quite durable if you understand how to fall or move. But if you've never done, you're sitting in a chair for hours a day and you get up and you're going to mimic something you saw some actual athlete, you're going to get hurt. And if you don't have the patience to learn it. So in sports, athletics, you learn what you're capable of and you learn how to move. But oh my goodness, if you had a coach that could explain things the way a martial artist, the way a skilled martial arts instructor can explain the movement, how fantastic would you be being able to pivot proper and shift your weight and drive? But that's what you get college level and professional level.
I wanted to articulate, just in case I didn't before, I wasn't taking away from sports or people doing sports and saying like they should do martial arts instead. What I'm saying is I think there's a lot of value in those things, and kids should be able to do them and play and have fun. And I really like that for the physicality part that you talk about, because now you really have to make sure your kids are in something so that way they are physical or moving in the very least.
Well, there's a confidence you get from that too, when you understand. Because as a young boy, and I don't know how relatable this is for you having not been a young boy, but as a young boy, once the older kids, I don't even know if this is relatable now or if it's totally different, because there isn't a lot of one-on-one interaction.
Yeah.
You know, as little, and you play, I don't know, you're playing basketball, pick up basketball. What was the park we used to play? Memorial Field, the basketball courts there in East Point forever ago. And you'd go up there as this little skinny, pimply-faced teenager trying to play pickup ball with these 20-year-old dudes. And, you know, they're saying stuff and talking about stuff you maybe haven't heard. This is pre-internet for the people listening. And
What
then
is
even
that?
before that would just be the local older kids saying things, doing things, or just kind of randomly beating you up. And then you go back to playing football or wrestling, or go back to play Nintendo. You know,
Yeah.
It's not terribly different, but the influence now is whatever you see on your phone, and people just, we know our students, our staff even, they're on their phones quite a bit. You know,
That's not exclusive just to them.
No, I know,
That's
but
everyone.
what I guess I can circle back to the trying to lead by example, where you're quite physically fit. You're in
Thank you.
incredible shape. You've always been in really good shape. You know, all eyes generally follow you when you're going places, and that's understandable. But even our staff will say things to higher ups, and we'll, you know, nudge and push. We don't force, but we try to lead that example. And most people aren't doing that. They always say, "Senpai, you're amazing. You're like a superhero." And I always think, well, good. Are you following that, or are you just watching from afar and having a bag of chips? And that's the saddest. It's the saddest thing. We have some of our staff don't even listen to your podcast. They'll go, "I'm busy." You're not that busy.
Well, this is true. I think
I know you're gonna
everybody
be the nice one about it.
Okay.
That's okay.
I know it's not everybody's thing to do all of those things, even though they admire it. So even though they might say like, "Oh, Sensei, like, how do you lift that many days? Or how do you do all of these things? Or how do you work so hard? Or how do you do all these things before you go to the dojo, then teach all day at the dojo?" But just because they admire it doesn't mean that they have any interest in doing it or putting themselves through that amount of work.
No, well, I understand
Because it's
that.
not easy.
To me, this, if you're gonna call yourself a martial artist, I just have a different expectation. For example, athletics again. So I coached after I'd graduated. I believe I did 2.5 years of the high school football, and I'll explain the half part. It wasn't even a half. And then I think 1 or 2 years of basketball. I was assistant because I was working another job too. I don't know if I want to digress into there's plenty of time because I did this, and this like a super old man, you know. But when I got to, long time ago. So in 2001, when I got to coach JV or assistant coach JV, which was fun, and I really didn't know anything about coaching, so I was doing what I thought was best, and I'm sure I messed up plenty. I was, nothing major. I mostly worked with the linemen. But the following year, that coach, and I could have this mistaken, but this is how my memory has it. The following year, the coach I was with on JV went up to be the varsity coach. And then he invited me up with him, which I was a bit intimidated by, because thinking, when I left the last 2 years, 2000, I guess technically it would have been the 2000 season and the 1999 season, since football's in the fall. Mac Blue, I believe East Detroit won Mac Blue and then tied. I don't remember exactly. Some of the good East Detroiters could pull that right out of their pocket,
Good.
but yeah, he's fantastic with that. But then I don't believe East Detroit varsity won a single game for years. And so the year I was on varsity, I don't even know if we made it to our first game, but watching these kids, and I call them kids, they were a year younger, I graduated, I guess, young at 17, but was the laziest batch of football players I'd ever seen. They weren't running. They weren't hitting the weight room. They weren't reading anything, which I'm big on reading. If you're gonna do something, read about it. And back then, I guess it wasn't as easy to watch videos, but now, good gravy, you can look up anything you want. I mean, you have to look up a lot because there's a lot of dum-dums just regurgitating information. But then I kind of lost it one day on them, and then I just quit. There's some kid was getting loud, and again, kid he was like a year younger, but I basically said all that about how they were lazy and they weren't running, they weren't lifting. The linemen were just soft, and linemen were always chubby or fat, but you have to be strong because you're smashing into some other guy who's 200. I think I was 250, 260 pounds back then. And you've seen pictures. For those listening, I recently found old yearbook pictures to show my wife. And we went from 9th grade to 12th grade. And by the time she got to 12th, she said, "Oh my God, what happened to you?" was the phrase that came out of your mouth.
Much worse out of context.
No, I supplied the context there. Just, I'd put on some weight for football or whatever. But point is, I didn't get it. Our coaches had us so excited to get out there and do our best. And if we disappointed the coaches, that hurt. I mean, the coaches made sure you knew, by the way, verbally. Whereas I guess on the mat, if I'm disappointed, I'm, as you say, passive aggressive, although you can read it in my face. But I didn't get it. And the kids they didn't receive that the way I did. They just started kind of talking back, but they weren't saying anything that would be offensive. They were just like, "You guys weren't that good." And I just said, "I'm done." And I came back one more year after that to do freshman, and then that was it. It was tough.
That's a different breed of people.
Well, that's what we get a bit now. And that's what's a bit depressing, I suppose, is the sensei always wants more for the student than the student wants for himself, which is usually true. Again, there are some senseis that don't care about the student at all. They just care about how the student feels about the sensei, which students
or coaches or anybody in that position.
But a student and a player should be wise to that, because that's how you get taken advantage of.
So what do you think makes an excellent teacher? You mentioned that earlier.
I'm still trying to figure it out. And you have to answer this question after. But I think I'll just say what I do. And if that makes me an okay teacher, I take a lot of time to replay in my head what occurred, perhaps at a class. Let's say the black belt class wasn't doing very well. Now, granted, just because you're a black belt doesn't necessarily mean you are incredibly skilled. It just means you put in the time and you put in the energy. And if you want to be great, there's always room for that. But I think taking the time to reflect as to why didn't the student get it, as opposed to why can't they get it? Because why didn't they get it essentially starts with you. Why can't they get it? Well, that could be they're lazy or whatever. Anything you want to do to pass the buck. Now, of course, sometimes and frequently the student just isn't trying. That's anything. That's anything. Athletic, school, whatever, employees. But I have to figure that. It's like a puzzle, which I love that part. How can you get this? Because not every student learns the same at all. Mm-hmm. And if that was the case, it'd be so easy. But no, and listening a bit. And maybe not listening with the ears so much. Observing, I should have said. Mm-hmm. Watch faces, watch posture, watch where the focus can go. Pay attention to what things worked, what didn't, and things that don't work. Maybe try it one more time, I suppose, but scrap it. Scrap it. Be self-conscious. Do you talk too dang much? Is there 5 minutes allotted time to teach this thing and you spent 2.5 minutes explaining what you're doing with a brief anecdote? Or did you spend 30 seconds explaining it, take a minute to have them rep it, re-explain it for 30, and then take the last bit of time? But this is all stuff I figured out as I went and paid attention to what didn't work or how was I taught when I was coming up, and then not doing almost any of those things. But what would you say?
I'd agree with what you said. I think a lot of reflection. I think a really great or excellent teacher can bring out of students what they didn't know that they had inside of them.
I like that.
So that's probably what I would say.
Yeah, say that part again, to bring out what they didn't know.
I think a great teacher is somebody that can bring out of students that the students didn't know that they had within them.
And that's tricky, because most of us don't want to leave our comfort zone.
Yeah.
But you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't try new things, and it's tough with as adults, we become incredibly set, which is odd, because I'd expect you'd be more malleable. I mean, little kids are incredibly influenced by everything. But as adults, we have wisdom and experience to know, to try things, but we just get so absurdly stubborn.
And rigid.
Oh God, so rigid with the, no, it's this way. It's like when someone believes in, I don't know, tooth fairy. And you're dead set on it. You're dead set on that tooth fairy. Well, what if there's a different thing that takes your teeth? What do you think about that? Well, if there's a little squid goblin, spawn of Cthulhu comes in while you're sleeping and takes it, and you're like, no, it's a fairy.
Actually, I think that's a really interesting thing that you said.
About the squid fairy?
No. But just how with time, instead of time and wisdom letting you become more flexible and fluid and adaptive, people become instead much more rigid. And it doesn't make a lot of sense, because as you said, with time you would learn a lot more and be able to say, okay, well, it doesn't have to go that way. It could be this, or it could be that. Or I don't have to react this way like I've reacted, 10 years, 5 years. I can react differently to see if I can get a different outcome.
You're right, but also, I'm very quick to get irritated with things, mostly based off of preconceived notions or expectations. But I love being surprised by that stuff. I want you to prove me wrong, and I'm willing to see it. But I'm not surprised if I'm not, proven. But when Emmy was on, and I've heard her say this in person, of course, the patient's usually the problem. It stinks. It's like when we get to tournament season, and we have, granted, our students do fantastic at these MFIT tournaments. I don't know how we get the stats on those, but I like the amount of first, second, thirds I see our guys carrying out, But when they're repping and practicing for the tournament, you'll get a lot of students or parents, and you'll get a parent afterward. Let's go to the end first. This is my ADD head bouncing. So after the tournament, we'll get a parent showing us a video, and we'll go, Billy. And the reason I say Billy, whomever's listening, is we have 0 students named Billy. So this is absolutely not a specific student. But the parent will say, Billy, I thought they did an amazing kata, and I thought the judges were biased. Now, of course, as a parent, you're going to have a bias. It's important to know that you have no idea what you're looking at as a parent. It's like those sideline coaches in sports, right? They're like, you should have done, just because you played in middle school or high school does not make you a player still. You played ball or tennis or whatever. I don't know. You did cheerleading, whatever. You're not a football player now. You're not a coach. You're not a golf pro. You understand your place. That sounds kind of mean, but you're not a black belt that's trained for 22 years. And by that, I don't mean you put a gi on twice a week. I mean, you're in a gi and a belt, let's say minimum average 5 days a week. And that's right. A lot. How do you say that nicely? So then before that happens, because obviously that student did not perform well. So while they're prepping, you go, okay, Billy, make sure your knees bent, which is the most basic rudimentary thing. There aren't any stances where your legs are straight. Even standing straight up, your knees should be slightly bent. Or straighten your front foot. Or when you do this transition, reach and stretch this way. Or whatever, X, Y, Z. And they just don't do it. And the ones that do it take the places home.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. The students, the same thing's repeated. And then eventually what'll happen if a parent isn't one to push the child and the child just goes, this is too hard. And the parent goes, okay, let's do something else. Then you're learning that you don't have to try hard at anything and just try something else. But then when you're an adult, and that's not such an option, you can't just go, my job's hard, I'm going to quit it, get a new one. That's scary.
Yeah.
You have bills to pay. You might have a family or animals or mortgage or whatever.
Right.
You have responsibilities, it becomes a risk. And then you never learned how great you could be because you never pushed or you weren't pushed. And unless you're self-driven, you need push. And most people aren't self-driven. And we try to do that gentle nudge or strong push, depending on what you need. And what we do. It's not just punches. I mean, yeah, I love working all that. I love the self-defense and the sparring and the throws and the kata and the weaponry because every time I'm teaching, I'm getting better. Yeah. Especially when I realize what I'm bad at. Or watching you teach, watching your technique. I go, oh, shoot, I hope I'm doing it like that.
When a class doesn't do well or a student doesn't do well, how much of that responsibility do you place on yourself?
You mean in tournament?
No, in class. Well, I guess you can apply it to the tournament too, but
you just mean in general?
Yeah.
If I was directly involved, I'd put almost all of it on me. If it's let's say a staff issue where I've been delegating things out and it's not done, I'm to blame first for not making sure that's done correctly, but I still know who was also at fault.
Okay, but how about in a class setting when you're teaching?
Oh, it's on me. If something isn't working, I try it maybe again, as I said earlier, and then you got to take a different approach. Because it's a clear sign of a lack of intelligence is to keep trying the same thing.
Yeah, right.
And anyone with anything between your ears will realize after once or twice that this isn't clicking. I need to try a different approach.
Well, I think the reason I'm asking this question is, to your point of being an excellent teacher, is I think it's much easier to say, like they just couldn't do it. It's them.
Sometimes that's so.
Yes, but I feel like you more often than not, after a class doesn't go well or to your standard or they're not doing maybe what you expect them to do or perform in a way that they should be performing at the level they're at, I feel like you put that on yourself, or I see that you put that on yourself a lot more than you would on the class or the student individually.
I think you should.
Yeah.
Any good leader, not to say I'm a good leader, but any good leader should take responsibility of the group. You can figure out where the weaknesses are later, but it starts at the top. Crappy leaders, pardon that language, poor leaders pass the blame or won't take any for themselves. And we see it all the time. I mean, shoot, read the news. But a poor leader will go, that's so-and-so's fault, which might be true, but you were in charge of so-and-so. You were in charge of that person. It reflects on you. And if you keep letting that stuff happen, but there's still plenty of black belts where they just constantly drop the ball and you give them another chance and they drop the ball, but they don't have the sense or the pride or the humility. I'm not sure which, I don't want to say the intelligence, but something isn't there to make them go, oh, I keep messing that up. And that's one that bothers me a lot because you become a screw up for life. And they come through all the time. And they don't last long in martial arts, but they're quite earnest when they get there.
Yeah.
Their zeal is unmatched. They're the kind of people that just, as soon as they're in, they're talking about building a room they have a dojo at the house, and they're getting punching bags and what's the best place to order this stuff. And I always try to nicely give them pump the brakes a little bit because every without fail, every time I've had a student like that, they don't make it a year or so, and if something happens or there'll be a tuition problem. And we always work with people with tuition, but then those kind of people, they got to do it again and again. And then once you put your foot down, they're like, what's the problem? And that hurts. Tuition, right? You got to pay the bills, but you take advantage of the kindness. You take advantage of the leniency. You take advantage of the second chance. And it's grown adults with families. It's young adults. It's parents of students. Mm-hmm. Everyone wants a favor until you're
out of favors.
Until you're out of favors, until you call in. You're like, oh, well, you have to do this. You're like, I'm not doing that. I've been burnt by that stuff. And I keep getting burnt by it. And I don't like it. It's an accountability. And if accountability isn't taught, and I can't teach that, because just me saying it or just you saying it, it's also, I've been talking a lot, so you need to talk after this. But one thing that I'll think about too often that hurts a bit is the idea that as soon as a student walks out the door, and I'd say this is probably, I'd say 90%, whatever we say or teach, because in the higher classes we'll mention there's usually some sort of I don't want to say a moral point, but we try to bring up some sort of character development.
Yeah.
Even at the Little Dragons, we say it's not as heavy, but the older you are and the higher level you are, the more we can kind of talk on it. And it doesn't go more than maybe 5 minutes, if that. And we'll repeat the message. We don't do the message though. I always feel like if it's just a message, it becomes a bit heavy-handed because you repeat it, And unless you really feel it, unless it's something you honestly feel, your message is empty. You're just repeating the Sensei said the message today is spread joy. So you guys should go out and spread joy. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And there's nothing. There's nothing. But, if that's what people want, you do you. You do you. But you talk to a black belt and you talk about the high morals and the character and holding a door for somebody, which is something I'm always watching every time people come in or when they let that door shut, which just, I want a little karate backhand.
A lot of our students hold the door, though.
Most do. Yeah. Most do. Some don't, and that's ignorant. But as soon as they leave the door and they exit the facility, a lot of them they're no longer martial artists. It's not even part-time. They're 2-hour martial artists, twice a week. And I don't know how to pass that, because if no one else in your life is talking about that, talking about the learn to desire, and learn to possess the drive to reach that desire. And it's more just like, okay, go back to normal, go to usual. And if you keep doing the usual, all you're going to get is usual.
But I think it takes a lot to cultivate that mentality of, I'm not just a martial artist when I come to the dojo. I'm a martial artist when I do X.
Why not, though? Why not? People remember the athletics, people define themselves by what's the word? Humans are tribal, So you go, I don't know, bumper stickers. Bumper stickers always tell you, old comedians to say, I like people with bumper stickers because it tells me who I don't want to be friends with. That's not my quote. That's a comedian.
Despise bumper stickers.
Well, some people need a lot of attention. So you have people that have, a lot for cats or dogs. So, I'm a cat person. I'm a dog person. Or people have the numbers for the marathons or the runs they did, which I like running, but I'm not running 9.1K or.
That's impressive, though.
Oh, it's insanely impressive.
That's crazy.
That's incredible. Anyone that can do that, the mental fortitude that takes, because your body gasses out quick enough. That's all mental, and that's amazing. Danny at the comic store. Every time he's like, I ran 5 miles today. I'll go 5. He's like, yeah, it was fine.
That.
And then he'll sit there and stretch.
Thanks for wearing the shirt, by the way.
Oh yeah, we love Danny at Comics Corner. But as long as I've known him, he's always just, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And I'll go, okay, I ran a mile on the treadmill.
Yeah.
But we define ourselves by that. Or you define yourself.
Which is good, I think, because...
it's okay, go ahead. I'll come back.
I think it's good because those are positive things, and if people want to...
They can be. I think sometimes they're negative.
They can be. If, like running a marathon or whatever, those kind of things are great. Like, do that. It's where it might go the other way, too, that maybe not be so great.
We can go every way but forward sometimes.
Well, I feel like people should be able to celebrate themselves and what they're into.
Oh, no question there. Just, I guess I was going off on a bit of a tangent, but you don't have to allow one thing to define you.
Yeah.
You define you. And if tomorrow you wake up and you have a different favorite color, that's the new you.
And that's back to flexibility.
Yeah, that's hard. I don't mean literal because I don't stretch enough, but the flexibility and mindset, that is something, that's what a martial artist is supposed to be. You learn that one technique is better than another. And of course, not every technique works on everything, but some techniques are garbage. And some people still teach that. And that's obnoxious because someone's going to get hurt. You learn, you've heard me share this, and I shared it in class years and years ago. I'd met just randomly some person, I don't remember her name, but she knew I taught martial arts. And the first thing she then follows with was, "Oh, I love martial arts. I just did a women's self-defense class, and I left feeling so confident I could defend myself. It was great." And I said, "Well, good. I love that. That's what I want to hear." And then she just kept going and says, "I know that if someone pulls a gun, I can just kick it right out of their hand." And I didn't know what to say. I didn't know, do I correct that and say, not in a million years will that ever work? Or did I just leave it and go, stay as confident as you want? So I just smiled and nodded. But people teach that. She paid money. She paid someone money to outside crescent kick a gun, or maybe she did the old front kick up and catch it afterward. I don't know.
That's very scary and sad.
But there's no way to vet it. You can't.
Yeah.
You can't. So if anyone's listening, you want to open up a martial arts school, there's no prerequisite. There are plenty of people out there that just made up their own style. You can buy yourself a belt online. You can get very nice ones. You can put as many stripes as you want. You can get your own certificates. And it's sad, but there really isn't any way to govern that.
Yeah, well, I guess if you're going to be starting martial arts, do some research.
Do some research. Always do. Talk to them. Check reviews, good and bad, because you'll learn a lot. See what anyone you know might have to say.
Yeah. And that concludes part number 1. Part number 2 is on the way. Part number 2 will be the next episode that will be released. I want to thank you all for listening to this episode and to the show. I want to thank my husband for being on this episode with me. I'm very fortunate to have somebody that is willing to do something like this, but is also so much fun to do something like this with. So, hope you guys listen to part 2. Thanks again for listening and tuning in. Peace out, Yantaraj.